Hello, everyone. My name is Davi Kalman. We will begin in a couple minutes. We are just waiting for the attendee number to level out a bit. We will start soon. Hello, everyone. My name is Davi Kalman, and I am an advisor at the Access Center. I'm also the awareness coordinator at Washington State University's Access Center. So I want to tell you a little bit about the Access Center because that is why we're here today. The Access Center provides accommodations and services to incoming and current WSU students with disabilities that limit their access to educational environment. Through this, we support the self-determination and development of students with disabilities through removing barriers to academic success. We also promote self-advocacy and provide support to foster student learning and engagement in all opportunities available at the university. We also help to foster support through awareness programming events throughout the year, including events like this. We would like to welcome you to the Disability and Intersectionality Speaker Series. The idea for this series evolved from the racial unrest taking place across the country. In response, the Access Center developed a statement in support of the Black Lives Matter movement and examined its policies and procedures for bias. But we needed to do more. We hope that this series helps to shed light on the importance of giving a platform to underrepresented voices. So through this series, we will address the intersection of disability and race, sexuality, sexual orientation, religion, socioeconomic status, and the series is organized by the WSU Access Center and also the Disabled Students and Allies Club. This particular event is sponsored by the Coalition for Women Students. I would also like to open the mic to Jennifer, who is the president of the Disabled Students and Allies Club, to say a couple words.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jennifer, and I'm the president of the ACT, and I represent the Vancouver campus. I would like to say I'm very excited about this speaker series, and I hope you all find it rewarding and a learning tool. So without further ado, let's get this started. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And once again, we would like to say special thanks to the Coalition for Women Students who sponsored this event today. We couldn't have done this without them. Also, a special note, you'll notice that we have live captioning for this event. To access and select the closed captioning button, make sure to select the closed captioning button at the bottom of the Zoom window, and then select Show Subtitle or View Full Transcript. If Zoom captions are not working, please use this link as a backup, and I'm going to add this in the Zoom chat function, so make sure to look out for that. Captioning and transcript will be available on the video recording in a few days. The video recording will be available on the Access Center website after the event, and I am posting that link in the Zoom chat as well. We also have an interpreter for the event today. The interpreter is working alone, and she may need to take about 5 minutes during the presentation for a break, but she will return. Also, this event will count for common reading credit. A link to a Qualtrics survey will be put in the chat after the Q&A, so make sure that the Qualtrics survey link, that you click it in order to receive your common reading credit. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Jamie Nolan, Associate Vice President for Community Equity and Inclusive Excellence. Serving students is the primary theme of Jamie Nolan's career. Her dedication to what she calls the work is what brings her career full circle and back to WSU to share her experience and energy as the Associate Vice President for Community Equity and Inclusive Excellence for the Division of Student Affairs. At the heart of Nolan's work is a passion for education and in finding common ground. Her efforts in the areas of diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice span 20 years and has encompassed mediation and conflict resolution. Training programs and recruitment retention initiatives focus on faculty, students, and staff from underrepresented communities. On the WSU Pullman campus, Nolan oversees the Gender Identity Expression, Sexual Orientation and Resource Center, Women's Resource Center, Multicultural Student Services, Access Center, Elson S. Floyd Cultural Center, and the Office of Equity and Diversity. Nolan also leads and coordinates the WSU system-wide culture and climate efforts. She graduated from WSU with both an undergraduate and graduate degree in American Studies with a focus on American comparative cultures. Additionally, she completed her doctorate in higher education at the University of Pennsylvania. Her experience includes serving as Associate Vice President for Community Equity and Diversity at the University of New Hampshire, as Chief Diversity Officer at South Dakota State University, and Director of the Office of Diversity and Equity and Community. Without further ado, welcome Dr. Jamie Nolan.
Wow. Isn't it always something when somebody introduces you and kind of captures your work like that? Thank you, Davi. That was amazing. I'm humbled by your intro. Yes, I'm a Coug. I have 2 degrees from WSU, and it has been a full circle, and it's something that was unexpected and has really proven to be a very important moment for me personally and professionally. Which is how I operate anyway. For me, there needs to be a congruence between those 2 things, and anyone who knows me for a bit knows how much I value the personal presence in the work that we do. I am so honored and I'm thrilled to be part of this moment. I have to extend my deep, deep gratitude for, first of all, my whole team. I am so deeply fortunate to have a team of people who are passionate, committed, give 150% to all that they do on behalf of underrepresented groups and groups within that who are also marginalized peoples. We go at it from a perspective of affirmation and power, not deficit. So this is quite a moment for us, and I think incredibly important that the Access Center is modeling and illustrating the importance of understanding the complexity of who we are as human beings and how important it is that we embrace the full complexity, right? This is a moment. This is a very powerfully historical, a powerful socio-political moment where we have an epidemic. We have the, I would say, a further affirmation to what the Black Lives Matter movement means and the tipping point that has occurred because of the two other issues going on, or I would say two other forces. On the one hand, the pandemic laying bare all the inequities that our country has been carrying forward for actually hundreds of years. And again, in addition to the pandemic, the tipping point that occurred with the Black Lives Matter movement, making it very clear to more people that there is a real need for us to attend to racial justice. So to the fact that the Access Center is bringing these forces together and looking at intersectionality is quite something, and so reflective, I will say with great pride, of the team with whom I work. I want to share with you just a brief, it's a tiny paragraph that I wrote to my mom. I shared this with my leadership team earlier this week, and I realized after I had written it that it really was a moment about where it was a way in which to articulate the moment we're all at right now with regard to issues of justice, of community, of access, all the things that those of us, I think everybody who's part of this moment right now, you wouldn't be here if you didn't have a care for this. You feel like you need to be here. And I believe we all show up at the right time with the right folks. So happy to have everybody here today and extend my welcome. So my mother sent me a text, and you know, it doesn't matter how old you get. I am 62, yes, it's true. And my mother still sends me words of worry and concern. And she sent me a text that was something like, you know, I hear when I read when you're in the family text, it seems like you're so tired and you're so stressed, and I really want to know that you're taking care. And I thought about that, what that means for us right now. And I thought of all the many, many people who have a much stronger right to be tired right now. I am a mixed race Latina with a lot of white privilege, and I move through the world that way. And that has been a core element to the work I do, understanding positionality, understanding privilege, and also understanding the impact I can have in addressing and dismantling those sorts of things, including privilege, including white supremacy, including our focus on able bodies and not taking into account differing lived experiences. So when I thought about what she said to me, and I believe many of you who are engaged in this work will resonate with this, because I think it's something those of us who do, as Davi said, I call it the work. And our guest speaker today, Stephanie Woodward, is also somebody engaged in the work, as is everybody on my team. And what I told my mother was this. I said, it's actually a strange blend of deep sadness, loss, and feeling so clear that I've been preparing for this moment. My work is incredibly meaningful, impactful, and salient. In many respects, I've been invigorated and inspired. And I went on to share with her an example of a program I've been participating in for our undocumented students, those who have DACA and those who do not. And in that moment, watching how we unfolded this program to reach out to our undocumented students across the system. And again, when we consider intersectionality, you can imagine there are students within our undocumented community who also have a disability and could be also a person of color, right? So it's all there. In fact, they largely are people of color. I talked about how we involved all the campuses and that we were able to illustrate, here's your person on the Vancouver campus, which is something I noticed we're doing today as well. Here's your person on our Tri-Cities campus, Spokane, Global. We went through the route and we were able to show the students that the web of support that we have created with them and for them, which is what we're doing with all of this work, which is what the Access Center does and all of its hard work. I said that, that the moment there was a very beautiful and powerful moment. And I said, so yes, I am working very hard, am tired, and I feel both the awfulness and despair of this moment and the power, the beauty, and profound meaning. This was happening right as the air was beginning to clear. As you all, those of you who live in our area know, we went through, it felt like an eternity, but probably about a week of really toxic air where we couldn't go outside. So everything we're talking about was exacerbated by this experience. So after I expressed how much I see the paradox of this being a both and moment of the beauty and the power and the possibility and the despair and the need for repair to our sense of shared humanity, I went on to say, the air will be better today. I'll step outside, I'll take a deep, deep cleansing breath of gratitude and get back to the work I love and to which I've committed my life. I also then thanked my mother for her part in bringing me to this way of being in the world. And I'm not sharing that for like some affirmation of ego. I share this with you because I believe when I was given those words, that they're words that we all share, those of us who are committed to the work of social justice and equity. And our guest speaker is a prime example of that. So let me introduce you to our guest presenter, Stephanie Woodward. I believe she is someone who's absolutely committed to and engaged in the work. She has service to our particular community, in this case, our disabilities community. But we know there are so many interconnections, which is why we have this series. So let me tell you, Stephanie Woodward is an attorney who is passionate about seeking justice for marginalized communities and has a record to show for it. As a crime victims attorney, Stephanie provides civil legal assistance to help people during some of the most vulnerable times of their lives and work to recover from crimes that they've experienced. As a survivor herself, Stephanie is infinitely familiar with how offenders victimize people with disabilities and how people with disabilities can recover with the right assistance. Prior to being a crime victims attorney, Stephanie served as director of advocacy at a disability rights organization for 5 years, where she built a team of fierce advocates who are all disabled and proud, who actively fought to advance the rights of the disabilities community on local, statewide, and national levels. Stephanie is an organizer with ADAPT, a national grassroots community that organizes to ensure civil and human rights of people with disabilities to live in freedom. Stephanie has been arrested multiple times. Yes, she walks the talk, while advocating for disability rights. While Stephanie's work spans across all areas of disability rights, she is particularly interested in the deinstitutionalization, community living, ending violence against people with disabilities, and improving access in the community. She attended Syracuse University College of Law, where she earned a JD with a certificate in disability law and policy. Her MS Ed degree is in disability studies. She is a proud disabled woman and civil rights activist and is committed to making the law work for all oppressed peoples. So Stephanie, we welcome you wholeheartedly and look forward to what you have to share with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie, for that incredible introduction. I so appreciate it. And your words really resonated with me during this time. It is a great time to be tired, but a great time to be invigorated by the work that we do. I'm here in Rochester, New York, coming to you. So you may or may not know that Rochester, New York right now is in a time of turmoil, much like the rest of the nation, but We are focused a lot on the interactions with our government and police after we learned of the death of Daniel Prude, who was a Black man with a mental health disability who was killed by police officers, and that did not come to light for over 6 months. That was, we would say, hidden by our government and our police department. So it is a deeply painful time to be in our community, but also beautiful and powerful for our community to come together, to know that we are demanding a better community for all of us, for Black people, for brown people, for disabled people, so that we can be sure that this doesn't happen again in the future. But that is not what I'm here to talk about today, but I did want to say that it's an invigorating and sad and beautiful time to be alive. And I am always joking with people that I'm getting married in 2 weeks, and it's great to plan a wedding in the middle of a pandemic and in the middle of a revolution. So with that, I also wanted to thank the Access Center and the Coalition for Women Students for having me today, and thank you all for being here as well. Before we get too deep into this, I want to just give you a quick visual description. I am a pale woman in my early 30s, I said that, with shoulder length curly hair. I am wearing a blue shirt, and then behind me, I have a black and white image on my wall of protesters in wheelchairs. This picture is from the early 90s after the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed. They are demanding curb cuts in this image, and it has my very favorite protest sign of all time prominently displayed, which says, "Asking did not work," which I believe really encompasses why strong advocacy is necessary, because sometimes asking just doesn't work. With that, before we get too deep, I also want to give a content warning that today I will be talking about violence against people with disabilities, and specifically violence against, oh, I'm hearing that my audio is going in and out. I'm going to try headphones for you to see if that improves this. I'm hoping that this is going to give you a better audio connection. So I want to give a quick content warning that I will be talking about violence against people with disabilities today, including violence against women and girls, up to and including murder. So if you need to take a break for yourself at any time, I encourage you to do so. The beauty of doing this on Zoom is that nobody knows if you've left the laptop to take a break for yourself. Also, I will just allow you to know that I'm going to be using language today that may differ from language that you have heard or agree with. I am going to be using the terms survivor and victim to recognize that within the world of domestic violence, people view themselves differently. Some people identify with the word survivor and that they have survived the violence that they've endured. Other people don't see themselves as survivors. They don't feel that they've survived anything. They feel that they didn't perpetuate this against themselves, and that they are a victim. And so to respect both, I will try to be using those terms interchangeably. I'm also going to be using the terms disabled person and people with disabilities interchangeably, because in the disability community, there is a discourse on which terms are best used, and I believe that the best term is the term that the person identifies with. So while I am a proud disabled person, I recognize that others in the disability community would identify as people with disabilities. So that is going to be how I am going to use both within this presentation. I'm also going to be using words that are harsher than that in reference to disability. I want to be clear that this is to demonstrate how society has pushed those words onto the disability community, and this is in no way encouraging me or me encouraging you to use those words. And And with that, I just really want to get started. So women with disabilities experience the highest rate of personal violence of any group in our society. And there are many factors that contribute to that. And one factor is self-esteem. So imagine for a minute that you are the average woman. You're told daily by beauty magazines that your hair is too frizzy and that your love handles are disgusting. Despite this, you have a pretty good self-esteem. And then you enter into a relationship with someone who is emotionally and then physically abusive. Statistically speaking, it will take you with your initial good self-esteem 7 times to leave before staying away for good. And during that process, your self-esteem will likely be torn down by your abuser. And that will make it even harder for you to leave. So now let's go a step further. Imagine you're a woman with a disability. And let's go with my disability just to make things a little bit easier. Imagine you were born with a mobility disability. Spina bifida if you desperately need specifics. And imagine you walked with a limp as a child and eventually a wheelchair became a part of your everyday life. Not so bad, really. Your family is supportive and you never really feel like anything is wrong with you until strangers approach you at the mall and say things like, "Can I pray for you?" Pray for me? For what? To heal you. What? Then every stranger feels the need to come up to you to tell you that you're brave. Brave for what? For living. That's what. You're brave for living with your disability. What was your other choice? They think it's a compliment, but what you eventually start to figure out is that these people mean that they would rather die than live like you. That's why you're brave. They'd rather die than have a disability. Having a disability is apparently worse than death. Your life is a fate that is worse than death. Or perhaps it's just the grocery store lady who looks at your mother and says, "Such a shame. She's too pretty to be disabled." And eventually, as you grow older, these grocery store ladies start saying it to you. So by the time you're 12 and you're reading 17 magazine where you're learning that you need to start straightening your hair or no boy will ever find you attractive and you need to stay skinny if you ever want to be loved, you're also hearing from every well-intentioned stranger that you're broken and you need to be healed, that there is something wrong with you and you need to be fixed. But you know that you won't ever be fixed. You're walking and eventually rolling like this for the rest of your life. And you were okay with your life until the world started telling you that on top of being a completely imperfect tween like every other girl, you're also broken, thus making you completely undesirable. You, my dear crippled girl, will never be pretty. You'll be cute. You'll be cute to the adults who like to patronize you and squeeze your cheeks and treat you like a child for the rest of your life. Adults that automatically think that because you're in a wheelchair, you're broken. But you'll never be cute to the boy in your 8th grade class with the perfect hair and the really great smile. He'll never think you're pretty because, quite frankly, you're a broken girl. All of those unsolicited prayers from the creepy mall strangers never kicked in, and your mom never got you that hair straightener. So your curly hair is just kind of a big poof of a mess, and you see Miss Frizzle every time you look in the mirror. Your entire life, you've been told you're not pretty enough because no girl ever is unless they're in teen vogue. And that's hard enough for every girl. But on top of that, your entire life, you have received compliments from strangers that were really just slaps in the face, constant reminders that you are just a crippled girl. You're never going to be on the cover of Teen Vogue. You'll certainly never be in Playboy. Wheelchairs and scars are not sexy. You will be a virgin forever. People who are not sexually desirable don't have sex. They don't get married. They don't have kids. They probably don't get kissed. People with disabilities are basically asexual, right? Right. Or at least that's how your doctors will treat you. Well, your pediatrician may eventually talk to your sister and brother about sex. They won't talk to you about it. After all, your siblings aren't disabled, so they can be attractive and they can have sex. You, my dear girl, cannot. You can either be desirable or you can be disabled. And since you've already got your wheelchair, I guess we know what path you'll be taking. You, my dear girl, only have one path. You will be disabled. You will be a burden on your family, a burden to society, just a plain old burden. Your dad told you you could be anything you want. You could change the world. But the rest of the world told you that you'll be nothing. You'll be a drain on society. You can't contribute. You will be such a drain and a burden that you will stress out people to the point where they will get violent toward you, but that's okay. You're going to see it in the news. Some girl with cerebral palsy was such a burden on her family that her father put her in his truck and connected a hose from the exhaust pipe to the cab and left it on until she died of carbon monoxide poisoning. Her dad will say he did it out of love. The media is going to show this murderous father compassion and say that the girl who was so much like you was probably better off dead. The adults who talk about this news story around you will say that they can sympathize with Killer Daddy because having a child with a disability must be very stressful. They'll say they can understand why the father murdered his disabled daughter. This is what you grow up with. This is what you hear every day. This is why you pray that someday, maybe someone will find you attractive. This is why you hope so fucking hard that someone will love you someday. And when someone finally does show interest, you stay. You stay even though they beat the hell out of you because they said they love you when the rest of the world told you you weren't worthy of love. You stay even when they force you to do things sexually that you don't want to do because hell, at least they think of you in a sexual way. You stay when they threaten to kill you because you know that you're a burden and that being with a disabled woman is probably very stressful. You stay. You stay and you don't say a word to anyone else. Who would believe you anyway? If you left, no one else will ever love you. You're lucky your broken, imperfect self found one person to love you. So what if he beats you and refuses to let you have your wheelchair and forces himself on you and tells you you're worthless? At least he loves you, right? You stay. You stay for years. I know you stay. I know you stay because I stayed. I stayed for 2 years. I stayed while he hit me. I stayed while he spit in my face. I stayed while my friends told me I was so lucky to have him in my life. I stayed while others told him he was stupid for dating me because I was a girl in a wheelchair. I stayed while he screamed at me and pulled my hair. I stayed while my family told me he was such a nice guy. I stayed. I think I broke up with him at least 20 times in 2 years, but I kept going back. Many times when I left, he'd apologize to me and tell me he loved me, so I went back. Later, when I left, I locked him out of my apartment to keep him away. So he slammed the glass door until it shattered. So I went back because I thought it was safer than trying to keep him away. When I tried to tell my friends about him, nobody believed me. When I left him for good, my friends told me I was stupid for letting him go. I stopped telling people eventually. I realized no one would believe me. But I'm telling you now. I'm telling you now because when I was 20, I started working at a disability rights organization and I started learning about violence against women with disabilities. I started hearing stories from real women who experience violence. I started learning about the rape and abuse that happens to women with disabilities who are trapped in institutions that never stops. And I started learning about the violence that happens to disabled women in the community that goes on for years and is never reported. And this is when I became passionate about ending violence against women with disabilities. I'm telling you now because it wasn't until I was 24 that it hit me that I am one of these women. I'm a woman with a disability. I experienced domestic violence. I experienced it just like the statistics say. I am a statistic. I am one of the women that I want so desperately to protect. I'm telling you now because the violence needs to stop. I'm telling you now because the words you say to girls and women with disabilities today will affect how we view ourselves and will affect our futures. I'm telling you now because I want you to stop telling girls and women with disabilities that we're broken, that we need prayers, that we're burdens, that it's okay if someone hurts us because they're probably just stressed from having to deal with us, or that we're pretty for a girl in a wheelchair. I'm telling you now because I want you to start telling girls and women with disabilities that we're beautiful, that we're wanted, that we're worthy of love, that you recognize us as sexual beings, that we're capable, and that no one should ever hurt us, no matter what. I'm telling you now. So what I just shared with you is actually a blog post that I wrote in 2014 titled, "Stop Telling Me I'm Pretty for a Girl in a Wheelchair." And now I am sharing my screen with you, and I am sharing a PowerPoint presentation. Throughout this presentation, It's going to have navy and like a seafoam blue kind of color scheme. And I'll describe the images as we go through. On this first cover page, it has an image of a woman in a wheelchair. You can't see her face, but you can tell that it is a woman figure in a chair with her hand touching the rim of her wheelchair. So I want to tell you about what happened when I published this blog. So this slide features an image of me looking directly at the camera in my own pink wheelchair wearing a blue shirt. So I published this on a blog that I'm pretty sure had 10 followers. Like, I didn't have a lot of followers. I didn't expect any attention from it. I had kept the fact that I experienced violence to myself for so long because I had said that when I tried to say it as it was happening, people didn't believe me. So I stopped talking about it. So for years, I didn't talk about it. And then I just wrote it. I wrote it all in one sitting. I just got it out there and I pressed publish. And what shocked me was that it was shared and spread so quickly. And I immediately started receiving messages of support from people who have experienced violence, people with and without disabilities, men and women, non-binary. But it was so incredible to have support when for years I didn't have that. What I loved the most was the appreciation from women with disabilities. I received emails and private messages and even public comments from disabled women saying, I feel like I could have written this. I feel like someone finally took my words and put them down. I feel like I didn't even know this about myself, but when I read it, I realized this about myself. This is my story. And somehow you took it out of me and you put it into words. And to realize that my story resonated with so many people was really meaningful. But what surprised me the most was the amount of negativity and skepticism that I received afterwards from people who weren't just giving me negativity from behind closed doors, but, from behind closed doors, but rather right there in public would share their feelings with me about how I was wrong. The rates of violence against disabled women aren't real. Like, I must be making that up. There's no way that women with disabilities experience more violence than other people. That I was wrong about media and society. There's no way that disabled people are perceived or given the narrative that we are less valuable and deserve violence. That's just not out there. That's all in my head. And that there aren't barriers for women and girls or other people with disabilities to seek justice if we experience violence. It doesn't exist. So what I want to go over with you today is I want to address that. I want to address the negativity and skepticism that I received and address why these are real issues. I'm going to touch on some statistics on violence against women with disabilities. I'm going to really go light on that because I think you can get into statistics on your own. You can really look into this, and a quick Google search, you'll find the evidence right there. But then I want to get into the narrative of disability in society and media and how that narrative not only impacts how we as disabled people view ourselves, but how society views us and how that allows violence to continue. Then I'll get into the barriers that people with disabilities face when trying to seek justice. And then because, hey, it's 2020, I want to talk about how COVID plays into this when we're talking about disability and violence. And then after that, I want to talk about what are we going to do about this? Why are we talking about it if we're not going to try to make change? So jumping into some statistics immediately. women with disabilities are more likely to feel isolated and unable to report their abuse, and may be dependent on their abuser for care, whether that is their intimate partner, whether it is they are dependent on a child or a parent for care, or even on a formal attendant service. We also are aware that reports against people with disabilities are low. So while we know that violence against people with disabilities is higher than violence against non-disabled people, we also know that the reporting is low. And something that is very important is that disabled people are less likely to receive justice. So I know that you may not have access to the slides, but if anyone does want to, there is a link on this slide to a law review article that discusses why police and district attorneys are less likely to seek justice for disabled victims. And part of it is because we are not perceived as, quote, the perfect victim. We are often gaslit, we are often not believed, we are often not the beautiful, innocent girl that you want to put on the stand. And I think what's really problematic is that most studies looking at violence against people with disabilities have this little asterisk that says that their study is focused on non-institutionalized people. This is problematic because disabled people are often forced into institutionalized settings where abuse occurs. Think about it. Nursing homes. You don't go to a nursing home unless you have some sort of disability. Group homes, mental health facilities, all of these institutionalized settings were created in order to segregate and warehouse disabled people. And that is where abuse can and does occur, and yet the studies don't look there. The studies are only looking at non-institutionalized people. So people with disabilities in the community are getting more violence against them. We're not even looking at the people who are segregated away, forgotten by the rest of our community. And on this slide, there is a quick graph demonstrating that people with disabilities are more likely to know their offender than victims without disabilities. And it goes through acquaintance, stranger, intimate partner, other relatives, and unknown. And for acquaintance, intimate partner, and other relative, the percentages are higher for victims with disabilities, demonstrating that they are more likely to know the person who is perpetuating the violence against them. Some other quick stats and facts. People with disabilities are 2 to 3 more times likely to experience violent crime, and specifically 40% greater risk of intimate partner violence, especially severe violence. And so what I have is a quick chart on this showing the violent victimization rate by sex and disability. This is from the National Crime Victims' Rights Week Resource Guide from 2018, showing that for both men and women with disabilities, they did not have a chart for people who do not identify with the gender or gender fluid, but for these two genders, you see that both men and women are experiencing violence at a higher rate when you have a disability. And while I recognize that people with disabilities are experiencing violent crimes and specifically domestic violence at higher rates, I also do want to be clear that I will likely be focusing specifically on women and girls today. And I just want to take a moment to recognize that despite the basic fact that disabled people are more likely to experience violence, there is an increased risk for violence for people with multiple disabilities, meaning that if you have a physical disability and a mental health disability, you're more likely to experience violence than if you only have one of those disabilities. But also, if you're a disabled person who is multiply marginalized, meaning if you're a disabled person who is also Black, or if you're a disabled person that's a person of color, if you're a disabled person who is in the LGBTQ plus community, or if you're a disabled person who's a non-citizen. These are just a few examples, but if you are a disabled person who is multiply marginalized, you are at an even higher risk of experiencing domestic violence or other violent crimes. So now that we've gone over just some basic statistics, I want to get into the narrative that is in society about disability and how that contributes to violence against people with disabilities and how it continuously allows the violence and even forgives it. And we're going to look specifically at murder suicides, kids with disabilities, and I want to touch on the Disability Day of Mourning. So on this slide, we have two headlines, and these two headlines are from about the same time period 2 years ago. The first headline is from the New York Times. It has a picture of a man and woman smiling and dancing, and it says, "Sweethearts forever." Then came Alzheimer's, murder, and suicide. They were absolutely soulmates. The next headline says, "It was a love story that ended up tragic. Couple found dead in Atlantic Beach home in an apparent murder-suicide." Both of these couples had children. Both of these couples involved a man who was the primary caretaker and a woman who became disabled in the relationship. And both of these couples involved the man murdering the woman. And yet in both of these cases, we get romantic headlines calling them love stories. Headlines are often romanticizing murder-suicides when one partner has a disability and the other partner cared for that disabled person. Murder-suicides aren't characterized in the same way when disability isn't involved. We don't call them romantic, we call them domestic violence, we call them murder because that's what they are. But for some reason when disability is involved, it's romantic. What does that say to people with disabilities in our society when murdering us is romantic? What does that say to your grandmother who may just now be experiencing signs of Alzheimer's? So I want to let you know what this is saying to the disability community. On this slide, I have 3 tweets from 3 different people in the disability community who actually responded to these headlines. So on the left, we have Sarah Lerner who tweeted, "When you romanticize a man murdering his sick wife, you make misogynistic violence within intimate partner relationships between men and women acceptable. This is exhibit A of how intertwined ableism and patriarchy is." And if you're not familiar with the term ableism, ableism is, in short, the idea that people with disabilities are less worthy or less than non-disabled people. It is similar to sexism, racism, things like that, just in the disability context. Kia Brown tweeted, "Me, stop romanticizing the murder of disabled/ill people." Twitter, "You have no idea the toll it takes to care for a disabled person. It's none of your business." Me, a disabled person. "You have no idea how it feels to have your whole life boiled down to being worthy of murder." And then Essie Smith tweets, "Disabled people are at a radically increased risk of intimate violence, as well as financial control and other forms of abuse. Glossing over that in a story about a man who killed his wife is, if I may be blunt, pretty, now it's blurred out here, but if you need to know the word, I support it, pretty fucking problematic." I think Essie got it right there. Essie followed that tweet up with, it also has huge intimate violence implications, which is something I never see people talk about in cases like this. If a non-disabled person killed a non-disabled partner and then died by suicide, people would rightly be up in arms. So what changes with disability in the mix? It's a fair question. But I want to go beyond just couples in murder-suicide. Nicole Bielman was a 27-year-old woman who had Rett syndrome who lived right in my hometown of Rochester, New York. I believe it was 2017 when her father, who was 60 years old, murdered her with a shotgun in the backyard and then killed himself. The police chief, on the same day that the murder occurred, quickly alluded to Nicole's disability as the reason her father murdered her. He said Nicole that was 100% reliant on the care of her parents, giving the illusion that it was caregiver stress or some reason like that that she was murdered. First, caregiver stress is not a reason to murder anyone. But second, that was untrue. Nicole went to Dayhab. Nicole received attendance services. Nicole got respite services, meaning her parents had additional services to allow them to take breaks, which means she was not 100% reliant on her parents' care. She had lots of care from lots of people who assisted her. But further than that, when you immediately, the first thing you say after a disabled person is murdered in a murder-suicide is to allude to their disability as the reason they are killed, you foreclose the opportunity of giving it a real investigation. What if her father was sexually abusing her this entire time for years and she was finally going to say something? And that's why he killed her. What if she knew something else? What if she knew he was having an affair? What if he was committing tax fraud? I don't know. But you have now foreclosed any possibility of a true investigation because you immediately blamed her for her murder. That's problematic. But it's not just murder-suicides. In the blog that I wrote that I read to you earlier, I talked about a girl with CP who was murdered. That girl was Tracy Latimer. Tracy Latimer was 13 years old when she was killed in 1993. Her father, Robert, killed her when he put her in his truck and connected the hose of the truck from the exhaust to the cab and left it there until she died of carbon monoxide poisoning. Later, when he was being investigated, he said that he had considered multiple methods of killing her, including a Valium overdose and, quote, shooting her in the head. And he said that he killed her because he loved her. She was better off this way. 1993 was when I was 5 years old. And this murder sparked an international controversy on the ethics of killing disabled people. Yes, the ethics of it. And I say that because on this slide, if you look to the right, it's the cover of Maclean's magazine. It's Canada's weekly news magazine, and it shows an image of Robert with Tracy, and it says, "Should Robert Latimer go free?" Tracy's killing raises questions about mercy, justice, and the limits of the law. What you may not be able to make out is that the date on this magazine is November 17th, 1997. Tracy, again, was killed in 93. That's 4 years. That means from when I was 5 years old until I was 9 years old, a repetitive news story in the cycle was whether or not it was okay to murder a girl who was just like me. Whether or not he should go free for murdering someone who was just like me. And it left me wondering if my mom or dad would kill me out of love someday because I could be a burden. But hey, this isn't just for 1993. We're living in the here and now. So I want to just give you an example of 2 children from Illinois, just so we can keep it in a a bubble of similarity. On the left, we have an image of Alex, who is in a red tank top. His arms are raised, he's smiling. And on the right, we have an image of Rayshani. She has a peace sign that she's holding up and a pink shirt. So Alex was 14 when he was murdered in 2013 in River Grove, Illinois. Rayshani was 11 in 2014 when she was murdered, and I believe it's pronounced Waukegan, Illinois. Alex died when his mother and his godmother tried to poison him, but that didn't work. And when the poisoning didn't work, they stabbed him. His mother specifically stabbed him in the chest 4 times, hitting his heart twice, and then she slit his wrists, and she slit one wrist so deeply that she nearly severed his hand. While she was doing this, the godmother went and killed the cat because they knew that the cat would have to go to an animal shelter when they were arrested, and they didn't want that to happen. Rayshani died from a stomach rupture after her mother punched her repeatedly. The autopsy revealed scars and old injuries indicating previous physical abuse. What's different about these cases is that Alex's killers, who again poisoned him, stabbed him 4 times in the chest, and almost severed his hands when slitting his wrists, pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and served 3 years each before they were sentenced to time served. Alex was autistic. Rayshani's killer was convicted of murder and is serving 43 years. Rayshani did not have a medically documented disability. What does this say about how society values the lives of disabled people? Both of these children are so valuable. Both of these children should be alive today. Neither of them should have been murdered. And both of them deserve real justice. One's killer got 43 years in prison for murder. The other, involuntary manslaughter in 3 years. Think about what that says to disabled people across the nation reading these stories about the value of their lives, about how our justice system values us and how seriously crimes against us are taken, even the ultimate crime. So what happened to Tracy and Nicole and Alex is not isolated. These are not individual instances. In fact, murders of disabled people by their families and caregivers is so common that the disability community has created the Disability Day of Mourning, which happens in March every year, where the disability community in different areas across the country get together to mourn disabled people who are murdered and to give their lives the true time that is deserved and the true mourning without giving any sympathy to their murderers and recognizing that they did not get the justice that they deserve. I encourage you all to check out disability-memorial.org to check out all of the individuals who have been murdered, but also how you can participate in a Disability Day of Mourning and how you can get one started if there's not one near you. So now that we've talked about this narrative that we are less worthy and how that can contribute not only to how we view ourselves, but how the rest of the world views the violence that we experience and how easy it can be to blow us off when we try to tell you about the violence we're experiencing. I want to get into some other real world barriers that are preventing us from reporting or seeking assistance. So I'm going to touch on poverty, fear, inaccessibility, communication barriers, and not recognizing or validating the abuse. First is poverty. And poverty is something that keeps so many people in abusive relationships. This is not specific to disability, but I want to be clear that poverty impacts disability in a very different way. And we have a graphic on the left that demonstrates that the poverty rate for people with disabilities in the United States is 2.5 times the rate for people without disabilities. And people with disabilities, many people with disabilities in the United States can be on Social Security. Not all, I don't want you to get that stereotype in your head, but I want to be clear that Social Security is there. The Social Security system can help people with disabilities, and the federal monthly maximum for SSI in 2020 is $783. Just think about that. How much is your rent? How far can you go with $783? So we are more likely to be living in poverty. And I just want you to be aware of what we call the disability tax. So disabled people are more likely to be living in poverty, but the things that we need to live are more likely to be more costly. So for me, as a woman who uses a wheelchair, for me to get to a shelter to receive domestic violence services, I would have to get there somehow, right? Let's say I live in a rural community that doesn't have access to public transportation. I would need to have an accessible vehicle. Do you know how much a wheelchair accessible van costs? I don't know, like, I do know actually. You can get one for maybe $50,000, $60,000. You would buy a really fancy car for that amount. I just get a van. But who has that much money to buy a vehicle? Maybe you do, but as I mentioned, disabled people are more likely to be living in poverty. So the living in poverty plus the disability tax makes it very difficult for us to seek out the assistance that we need. Next is fear. And again, fear contributes to so many people and why we do not leave domestic violence relationships. But the fear that disabled people experience may be very different than what you traditionally think of as the things people fear. So we want to touch on just a few of those. Fear of losing assistance or being institutionalized. If your partner is the person that helps you get in and out of bed so that you can get to work, and you can't get in and out of bed without your partner to help you, but your partner also abuses you, that's a hard choice to make. Yes, your partner is abusive, but not all of the time. But you have to go to work all of the time. And if you break up with them and you can't get someone else to help you, you'll lose your job, you'll lose your house, you might have to go to a nursing home. That's a hard choice to make. Fear of not being believed. This is huge for people with mental health disabilities. For me, as a person with anxiety, this is a fear I have all of the time. And for people who are gaslit all of the time because of their mental health disabilities, this is huge. Fear of getting into trouble. As I mentioned earlier, we are not always taught about sex. People with disabilities, particularly if you're born disabled, aren't taught about sex. So if you're not taught about sex, you're likely not taught about sexual abuse. So you're not taught about good touching and bad touching. I helped a woman who was being sexually abused, and she knew it was wrong, but it took her years to say something about it because she thought that she was going to get in trouble because of it, because parts of it felt good, and didn't fully comprehend that your body can react in certain ways and it still not be something you want. And fear of further abuse. Let's say you're in an institutional setting. You're in a nursing home and one of the nurses there is abusing you. But if you report it to a different nurse, what if she doesn't believe you and she goes back and tells the first nurse? And that nurse now abuses you worse. Inaccessibility. I think physical inaccessibility of shelters is huge. You wouldn't believe the amount of shelters that don't have ramps to get in, don't have accessible bathrooms. Those are really easy things to identify. The harder ones are programmatic or systemic inaccessibility. So one of the big ones right now is that throughout the United States, there is a war on opioids, that opioids are bad and we have to get rid of them. But there are lots of disabled people who are taking prescription opioids very safely for their disabilities and that they need them. They need them for pain management. But shelters have no opioid policies, whether or not they're prescribed, just don't want them in the shelters at all. So now you're a woman with a disability, with chronic pain, and you have to choose between going to get assistance to get away from your abuser, but you have to give up the medicine that makes the pain stop. What do you do? And inaccessible information. The amount of organizations that don't have websites that can be read by a screen reader, which is what blind people use to access websites, don't have captions on videos. You're leaving so many disabled people out that cannot access your services when you don't make information accessible. And on this slide, there is an image of prescription drugs with a big red kind of X over it. Communication barriers, and this is really important for specifically the deaf community, but also others in the community who have speech disabilities. We see that sometimes shelters and other accessible, other organizations don't know how to take or refuse to take TTY and VRS calls, so they hang up on the caller. Lack of ASL interpreting. It's not enough to just have ASL interpreting, particularly in domestic violence shelters just for counseling. I helped an individual who said she went back to her abuser because there was only counseling for 1 hour a day. So for the other 23 hours a day, she felt so isolated and alone. That's heartbreaking because she only got an interpreter for 1 hour during counseling and the rest of the day she felt alone. Failing to communicate with people with speech disabilities, not talking to them one-on-one, always relying on the person next to them. What if the person next to them is the person abusing them? Take the time to talk to people with speech disabilities. And then assuming people who can't speak or people who don't speak can't communicate at all. There's lots of people who don't speak but can communicate in other ways, and you just have to learn about the technology or the gestures that they use to communicate. And then lastly, not recognizing or validating the abuse. You may be being abused in ways that you don't understand is abusive, or not recognizing that those specific actions are abuse. So your partner takes away your medication that you need. They never hit you. Is that abuse? They take away your talking device when they don't want you to talk to them anymore. Is that abuse? Or again, as I mentioned earlier, not knowing what that sexual abuse is because you were taught about it. So lastly, I'm going to just quickly touch on domestic violence, COVID, and disability. We already know that domestic violence is increasing due to lockdowns and that intimate partner violence dramatically increases during times of natural disasters. And on this page, I just have a quick chart that shows that in one county in Texas after Hurricane Harvey, it shows how dramatically increased the strangulations were. So in the year before Hurricane Harvey, the entire year they experienced 1,410 strangulation reports. Post Hurricane Harvey, just by July, halfway through the year, they had already gotten 1,430 reports of strangulation. So they were already increased by 20 reports halfway through the year. So times of crisis already naturally lead to more domestic violence. What does this mean for people with disabilities? CNN published a great report called Sick, Dying, and Raped in America's Nursing Homes. This report showed that between 2013 and 2016, more than 1,000 nursing homes were mishandling or failing to prevent cases of rape, sexual assault, and sexual abuse at their facilities. That was between 2013 and 2016 when we had full access. We as a society could go into nursing homes and see our loved ones. It is now 2020. We're in the middle of a pandemic where many states are shutting down access to institutional settings. You can't go to nursing homes anymore, or you have very limited access. They say it's to keep people safe, and I truly want to keep people safe. But what is happening behind those closed doors that isn't safe, that isn't being reported? Because it wasn't being reported between 2013 and 2016. So it's certainly not being reported now. What the violence that is happening, it's not just happening to people who are between 18 to 35. The violence happens to all ages, and we need to care about everyone, including people who may be out of sight but should not be out of mind. So now that I've gone through all of this, I want to talk with you all about what are we going to do about this? I've got some quick suggestions, but then I want to talk to you. First, I think we need to watch the language that we use around disability, and we need to actively change, because how we talk about disability not only impacts how I view myself, but it impacts how society views all disability and the violence that we experience and makes it acceptable. But we also need to, of course, check on people in nursing facilities and ensure that the policies in our own states allow us to do so even during quarantines. We need to ensure that domestic violence services and websites are accessible. And of course, we need to demand that district attorneys and law enforcement seek real justice for people with disabilities. So I think I could talk about this all day, but I really want to get this conversation going with you. And I hope this conversation is really fruitful, but if it lasts too long and we run out of time, I do just want to let you know you can contact me. I'm Stephanie Woodward, and I'm at disabilitydetails@gmail.com. And I think this is where Davi comes in and says, Stephanie, you took way too long.
Stephanie, you took way too long. Just kidding. At this time, we would like to have time for a Q&A. And I know we're getting lots of great questions, so if we may run like 2 to 3 minutes longer, if that's okay, and the interpreter may take a break at this point. So Ashley, if you need a break, feel free to. But there are a couple questions. I'll read them as they came in, and a couple participants asked to read you the questions themselves. So I will start with the first question that says, for lack of counseling for people with disabilities or limited amount of time for counseling, what do you think would help to change that?
You know, I don't know that it was the limited counseling that upset this particular person. It was that Asl Interpreting was only provided during that limited counseling time period. So what she really needed was to feel a connection with other people in that shelter during the other 23 hours a day, because there were other people there, but they wouldn't communicate with her. So I think it's about ensuring that organizations that help any domestic violence victim or survivor makes the effort to ensure that everybody is included. If you don't know the language that person speaks, whether it's ASL or Spanish or something else, make the effort to learn. It's not hard to get a Spanish translation app, and you know what, even if you butcher it, that person feels more included. And if you don't know ASL, writing notes back and forth, trying to pick up some sign language to make that person feel included, I think is what's really important. Because if I went to a shelter, I might feel excluded as a wheelchair user because people get uncomfortable sometimes around people with physical disabilities. And it would mean a lot to me to make sure that someone put in the effort to make sure that, hey, at dinner, come over here, sit with us.
Thank you, Stephanie. And then also, there was an individual who asked to read the question themselves to you. Kylie, we have promoted you to have video and mic access. So if you'd like to ask your question to Stephanie, you can do so now.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. So I was just kind of prefacing this. I kind of had just a down day yesterday, just with some interactions that I was having recently with some men that I know, some that I don't. Some are family members, and then also some other family members, women, having some of these same conversations where you're being accused of using the gender card when you want to talk about issues related to women or highlight issues related to women. And I think this could apply to a lot of conversations, whether we're talking about issues related to disability or issues related to Black, Indigenous, people of color, minorities, marginalized groups. And that's when I Googled, how to be a woman in today's world. And I came across a great TED Talk that mentioned the documentary called Human. And I did include that. I haven't watched it yet, but I think it's really powerful. It's supposed to be just like thousands of human stories from across the world. And I wanted to ask you, what is your advice when someone is advocating for themselves or others, and they're basically just told that that's not true, you're lying, that's inaccurate. And I guess, how do you know when you're kind of wasting your breath, or are you never wasting your breath because at least you're trying, despite being shut down in the conversation? It's just, in your experience, I'm sure you've come across this a lot in your life and your journey. When people are just trying to shut you down about what you're talking about, do you just keep going? Do you just keep talking to them, or do you walk away? What's your perspective?
I think that it really depends on what you are trying to get across. So I think that if you are trying to seek help for yourself and someone is telling you that you are lying, that something is not true, then you need to seek a different audience. It is not worth you to waste your breath for someone who's clearly not interested in helping you. There is someone out there who can and will help you and will give you the support that you deserve, and the person in front of you is not that person, and they don't deserve your time. But if you are trying to make progress in a social justice issue, so it's not you seeking support for yourself in some sort of traumatic event or just even some self-care, if it's just about you're trying to make progress on an issue that they're not seeing, then sometimes, and I hate saying this, I have to find someone who looks more like them. And it's very frustrating for me but I work a lot with allies, particularly as a disabled person. I like to think that I could articulate all day long and maybe someday someone will catch on. But I used to tell my staff that the only time they'll see me cry is when I think someone is so impossible to get through to that I can't explain to them how they can't see what is so obvious that it literally makes me cry, because I get so frustrated. But I could bring in an able-bodied person who is an ally, tell them the same thing, and they could explain it to the other able-bodied person in the exact same words, and they're like, huh, yeah, I see that. It's very frustrating. It's like men hear about sexism better from other men than they hear it from women, which only perpetuates sexism more, but it helps at least get that message in so that that door is now open for me to continue speaking. So using your allies as much as you can to get that message through. And there are some people you're never going to get that message through to. your aunt on Facebook who has very different views from you, like, they're not, I've got lots of those aunts. You're never going to get that message through. I keep them on my Facebook though, because I can block, like hide their timelines so I don't have to see their views, but I want them to keep seeing mine because I want them to maybe someday have a switch go off. And it doesn't take any effort on my part for me to talk to them about it. They just have to keep reading. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Stephanie. We have 2 more questions. Our next one is from Maureen, who said that this is very deeply disturbing, but so very needing of the light of day. How do you remain grounded and hopeful when battling ignorance and prejudice?
Well, when I was young, I would complain a lot to my dad that we were wasting our time. He was, it sounds very silly. He was like fixing these boxes, like these electric boxes. He was an electrician. And I was like, why are we sitting here all day doing this? Like, are you getting paid a ton of money? And he was like, no, I do this for free. Like, I volunteer my services to the Red Cross. They were hot boxes that kept meals hot. And I was like, you're volunteering? Like, you're not getting paid? And he made me sit down and make a timeline of our lives. And I had to graph out how many months I would be alive. He suspected I would live to 90. That was very kind of him. And like, I had to highlight how many months I'd already lived and how many I had left. And then I did one for him, how many months he'd already been alive and how many he had left. And he sat the charts in front of me. And obviously mine had a lot less highlighting than his did because I had lived a lot less life than him. And he said, this is how much life you have left to make the world a better place. If you aren't here to make the world a better place, I don't know what the fuck you're doing here. So stop complaining and do it. And since that day, I haven't forgotten that I don't have forever to complain. I have just those boxes that I have to fill in every month to make the world a better place. So yeah, life sucks, but if you drown yourself in how terrible it is, then you won't have time to make the world a better place. I think I lost Avi.
I'm here, I promise. Okay, our next question is from Caitlin, who says, what are some key or good resources to start at when getting involved with advocacy for people with disabilities, and also for victim advocacy?
Okay, this is awesome. Thank you so much for asking. I'm an organizer with ADAPT, so I would be remiss if I didn't tell you to check out nationaladapt.org. We are a grassroots organization that participates a lot in direct action and civil disobedience to fight for disability rights. Also, the National Council on Independent Living does a lot of policy work. I think you can find them at ncil.org. So you could check out different policies that are happening for people with disabilities. And while there's lots of organizations that do domestic violence work, I strongly believe that the best work happening for people with disabilities in the violence realm is happening at disability-led organizations, not at domestic violence-led organizations. So I would start there and have these conversations going. And if you have a local independent living center, talk to them about what they're doing to help in domestic violence situations. And I want to be very clear that independent living centers are very different than assisted living centers. People can mix them up. Assisted living is like a nursing home. Independent living centers are organizations run by and for people with disabilities to help disabled people live successfully, happily, and independently in the community.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. We have another question from Hannah. If only the dominant group can influence the other dominant group, so male, male, able, able, what can we do as a minority group to voice ourselves effectively? What types of communication can we use?
Oh, I didn't say only. I said that there are some people that are so stubborn that only some people can get through to them. I actually have some faith in humanity that we can get through to a lot of people. Marginalized people can get through to so many other people. But there will be those stubborn ones that, like, sometimes as a woman, I can't even get through to another woman because I'm a disabled woman and she can't hear my disabled voice. It's not like woman enough for her. So I have to get a non-disabled woman to talk to her. But there are plenty of women who hear me just fine. But I always go for 5 different prongs of advocacy. They're the ADAPTS prongs of advocacy, and I want to just, let me touch on them really quickly, how we believe in advocating. And I might just lose one, who knows. So the first is through media and education. So educating about issues through getting on the news, getting on your social media, putting it out there so society is always seeing it. I want to see more stories about disability in your TV every night, because the more you see disability as something that is part of the everyday life, the less you are going to see it as other. So that is something that we need to see more of. So media and education. Legal. Use the laws out there to enforce your rights. Hey, that's what laws are out there for. Don't be afraid to use them. And I'm not saying that just because I'm a lawyer, but I do love the law. 3, legislative. Go talk to your legislators. Help get more laws passed. Lobby to get good legislation out there. Don't be quiet about what you need as a citizen. 4th is administrative, and this is really about getting voices from our communities in places of power. Is there a position in city council? Let's get a Latina woman in there, shall we? Like, let's get someone who actually represents your community in these positions. And it doesn't have to be just elected positions. It could be appointed positions. It could be on boards and local charities. Positions of power are all over the community. And the more our voices are out there, the more it's being spread. And then the very last is direct action. When all else fails, I'm always down for a good protest, because as the sign says behind me, asking did not work.
All right, Stephanie, I think that is all the questions that we have today. Everyone, thank you so much for attending. It is officially 1:30 p.m. I wanted to let you know that once this event ends, that it will send you directly to an exit survey. This exit survey has questions about the event, what you like, what you didn't like. It also has an opportunity for students to put their name and information for extra credit if your classes are giving you extra credit for attending, and then for fraternity and sororities for giving participation credit for attending. So make sure that you fill out the exit survey when it ends. And with that, we'd like to thank you so much for attending our 3rd event in the series. Thank you, Stephanie, for coming. You were wonderful. And Kyle, you can sign us out. Thank you all so much.